We are continuing our journey through the book of Esther. Esther chapter 2 is our text this morning. And our worship in the Word was that story about the man who came to Jesus, who was wealthy by the world's standards. He came to Jesus and he said, how do I inherit eternal life? How do I get a life that has impact, that lasts forever, that goes on into eternity? And Jesus said, get rid of your stuff. Get rid of your stuff. And the man went away sad. We skipped those last couple of verses. He went away sad because he had great wealth. And Jesus said, how hard it is for those who are wealthy, those who are rich in the world's eyes, to enter the kingdom of heaven. And that text is not what we're preaching on this morning. It's not what we're walking through this morning, but it sets a context for us. It gives us a foundation for examining this world that Esther is coming into. When we gave our introduction last week and we talked about the first chapter, I said, pay very close attention because the book of Esther is all about power relationships. It's all about power dynamics. It's all about who has power. It's all about who wants power. It's all about how the powerful are living their lives, about how power is manipulated and envied and used, both for good and for evil. We saw last week the power play between King Ahasuerus, or King Xerxes, depending on your translation, and Vashti, who was his queen. That after a week, a solid 7 days of drinking, he called for her to come and to show off her beauty before his council and his people. And she said, no. I'm not bringing my royal self and my royal crown to parade my beauty in front of a room full of drunk men. Not going to happen. And so he listened to the advice of his council. That's that second power relationship. So we've got the king and Vashti, and then we've got the king and his council. And they said, we cannot let this stand. Before you know it, every wife is going to be thwarting her husband. It's just going to be terrible. We just cannot let it stand. And so we see that power relationship between men and women. And now we're about to see emerge this relationship between conquered people and dominant culture. Esther, is not a native of this land. She is part of a people who were conquered and who were brought forcefully from their homeland to a new place, who are desperately trying to scrape out an existence and a living in the new place where they have been planted. We're going to see power between the king and his subjects in this chapter. And let's pay attention. Let's pay attention to what it means to have power and what it means to not have power in this society. And I will help you by pointing it out as we go through. So we know that the king has sent Vashti away by royal decree that cannot ever be revoked. She shall not enter his presence again, and her royal title will be given to another. This is the decree that goes forth. And we start up sometime later. We don't know how much time. It just says after these things, when the king is now sober. Okay? And that's where we pick up this morning. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Quick, let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint commissioners in all of the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in the citadel of Susa, under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetic treatments be given to them, and let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This pleased the king, and he did so. The king had sobered up, and he was sad because he kind of liked Vashti. She was kind of a nice girl. They had gotten along well together. And because of that drunken declaration, he could never see her again. And so his servants and his council begin to go, oh no, what do you do when the person in power is upset? You let him stay angry? You let him stay upset? You let him stay sad or depressed? No. You distract him, right? This man has the power by his decree to make laws that can never be overturned. This is a guy you want to be happy. This is a guy you want to be happy, or else you might just be Vashti. So they're like, quick, get a distraction. Quick, let's replace Vashti so the king will feel better and maybe we'll all be safe. Because when there's unequal power, those without seek to mollify those with power. This plan pleased the king. And so he sent out his word. Let's pick up with verse 5. Now there was a Jew in the citadel of Susa, whose name was Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with King Jeconiah of Judah, whom King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had carried away. So this is an important detail. When the people were carried away into exile, it was the Babylonian Empire that did this. Now, the Medo-Persian Empire has come in and taken over their territory. So they're captive people, but they're no longer under the same captors who had them before. So they were conquered, and then the people who conquered them were conquered. Okay? So Mordecai, and by extension Esther, were from this family of Benjamin, this family of Kish, who had been carried away by Babylon, and now they're living in the citadel of Susa. So verse 7, Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his cousin, for she had neither father nor mother. The girl was fair and beautiful, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai adopted her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in the citadel of Susa in the custody of Hegai, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put in custody of Hegai, who had charge of the women. There are some tellings of this that talk about, or that treat it as though these women went voluntarily. They treat it as though this was a beauty pageant. In fact, I've seen it portrayed as a beauty pageant. Come on, VeggieTales, do better. It was not a beauty pageant. And these women did not go willingly. I'm sure that there were some families who, hoping to gain power, did send their daughters. But Esther was taken. And if there's one thing you can remember from this chapter, circle it, underline it. She was taken. The Jewish people had been taken into captivity by one overlord, and now they were under another overlord. Trust me when I tell you, they were not looking to be part of this game. She was taken into the king's palace along with other women, taken up and put under the charge of Hegai, the king's eunuch who had charge of the women. Now, for some reason, Esther seems to be one of those people that when you see her, when you meet her, you just want more. She's one of those people that you meet her and you go, oh my goodness, I don't know what it is, but that girl has spark. She's got something. She's got something. And it's in her very name. Esther means star. And where do stars shine the brightest? In the darkness. In the darkness. Esther was in the darkest of dark places, a person in captivity, placed into a role she never wanted, and yet she still shines. It's already been said that she was beautiful, but here it says that Esther pleased Haggai, the eunuch. She pleased him and won his favor, and he quickly provided her with cosmetic treatments and her portion of food and 7 chosen maids, and advanced her and her maids to the best place in the harem. Can't tell me it was just because she was pretty. I'm sure she was. I'm sure she was beautiful in physical form, but she had something else, something inside of her that shined. For Haggai, who had seen it all, okay, he had seen it all. He was in charge. He was in the highest place in the king's harem. He was in charge of all the women. Trust me. He'd seen pretty little princesses come in. He'd seen women pulled off the street. He'd seen it all, and something about Esther spoke to him. And he immediately put her in the best place in the harem. Esther did not reveal her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her not to tell. Every day, Mordecai would walk around in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and how she fared. The turn came for each girl to go in to King Ahasuerus after being 12 months under the regulations for the women, since this was the regular period of their cosmetic treatment. 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics for women. When the girl went in to the king, she was given whatever she asked for to take with her from the harem into the king's palace. In the evening she went in, and the morning she came back to the second harem, in the custody of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. And she did not go into the king again, unless the king delighted in her, and she was summoned by name. So the king has an empire, and he has commissioned people in every section of his empire to send in women. And we don't really know how long this took. We're given some dates that smatter throughout, but we're not really sure. How long would it take for you to go through every beautiful woman in your empire? Each one getting a night. One night. With the hope that you would remember her name. I'm just going to let that sink in. With the hope that you would remember her name. And probably nobody could tell you, right? If you're the king, you didn't have somebody on hand to go, no, that girl, you know, the girl with the cosmetics, you know, the girl with the perfume, you know, the girl with the thing, with the pink scarf, the girl with the pink scarf. No, you had to remember her name. So countless women later, verse 15, it was Esther's turn. When the turn came for Esther, daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had adopted her as his own daughter, to go into the king, she asked for nothing except what Haggai the eunuch, who had the charge of delivering her garments. Because what else are we going to do? Esther had the wisdom to know and understand that she wasn't going to be able to figure it out on her own. She knew. She knew. I have no idea. I'm just a girl from Susa. I'm just a girl. Part of a captive people. I'm just a girl. And so she asked for his advice. She only took in what he advised. It says, now Esther was admired by all who saw her. This is the second time that we're told that she was a person with a magnetic personality. Immediately, Haggai gave her the best place in the harem, and here the narrator makes sure we know she was admired by everyone. When Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus in his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the other women. Of all the virgins, she won his favor and devotion, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet to all his officials and ministers, Esther's banquet. He also granted a holiday to the provinces and gave gifts with royal liberality. It seems to me that the plan of his servants, remember back at the beginning of this chapter when he was down in the dumps and depressed because of his decision, and his advisors said, hey, let's do this thing, let's distract the king, let's get some virgins, let's make a new queen. It worked. It worked. He put the royal crown on her head, and what did he do? He was magnanimous. He threw a banquet. He declared a royal holiday, and he gave out gifts. What do you do when the guy with all the power is upset? You find a way to make him happy. Because when the king of the empire is happy, then there's a chance that it might trickle down to the common man. Verse 19, we get a little glimpse of some backstory here. When the virgins were being gathered together, so this moves us back in time, right? Rewind. You remember when those virgins were all being gathered together? Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Now, sitting at the king's gate doesn't mean that he liked to go take his lunch and sit in the shady spot. Sitting at the king's gate was a term that indicated that he was an elder, indicated that he was a person of respect and some authority in the community. He would have sat in the king's gate, perhaps deciding disputes between people, perhaps overseeing legal transactions between people, perhaps as what would be now like a notary public, like somebody who witnessed signatures, somebody with some clout, somebody who was trusted in the community. Now Esther had not revealed her kingdom, her kindred or her people as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was being brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, that's twice, right? Repeated it. Remember, Mordecai is not just some guy. Mordecai has standing in the community. While he was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Ahasuerus. But the matter came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, both men were hanged on the gallows. It was recorded in the book of annals in the presence of the king. Now that's important information for later in the story, okay? But it sets up for us also an understanding of who Mordecai is. That he's not just a laborer, he's not just somebody who did menial tasks. He was somebody with some authority and some clout in the community already. And Esther respected him. So that gives us two reasons to think Mordecai is an upstanding guy. People in the community have given him a place of authority, and Esther herself has given him a place of authority in her life, even though she's no longer in his household. You know, when you're growing up, when you're under someone's authority, you're growing up in their house, you have to do what they say, right? But what do most teenagers say? When I leave, I'm going to do whatever I want, right? The day will come, you'll no longer be able to tell me what to do. You're not the boss of me. That's that, 2 or 3-year-old come 16, 17-year-old, right? But Mordecai had enough respectability that even when she was no longer required to do what he said, she still followed his advice. She saw him as someone who was trustworthy and respectable. That's something for us to keep in our back pocket and to remember in the chapters that are to come, because Mordecai is going to be involved in a power struggle of his own. But as we've read through this chapter, we've seen these power dynamics at play. We've seen how people who are without power are afraid of the moods and whims of people with power. We've seen how those who are without power can be caught up in the schemes of those who are trying to gain power or to manipulate the power of those who are at the top. We've seen how even in a place with no power, having integrity, having that special something, that spark, has given Esther a place in the kingdom she could never have imagined. And no wonder Mordecai told her not to tell anybody what people group she was from, because that too could have been used against her. When we look at this story and we think about what Jesus said in that Mark 10 passage, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom. When you are in a position of power and authority, when you're able to manipulate your circumstances and make them do what you want, when you have good things happening in your life, how often do you stop and question, am I making the right choices? How often do you stop and question, did I make the right decision? When you're in power, when you have authority, when you have wealth, chances are you're not going to ask that question. Because if things are going well for you, then obviously you're making the right choices, right? How hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom because they may not believe they have anything to repent of. If everything in your life is going well, where did you go wrong? What do you mean I may have made mistakes? We see the king in this place of having made a mistake. He feels he made a mistake in banishing Vashti. But he doesn't repent of it. Instead, he uses his power to assuage his guilt, to make himself feel better. He doesn't repent of that decision. He compounds it by pulling all of these women out of their communities and into his harem, by using them to make himself feel better, and then discarding them. And sure, Esther ends up with a crown, and we're glad she does, because a lot of us know the rest of the story. We're glad she's in this place of power and authority, because if she wasn't, bad things would happen, but it doesn't make what the king did right. It doesn't make what he did just. It certainly doesn't make what he did. It doesn't make him a good ruler. He's just a guy with a lot of power, trying to put down a guilty conscience. How hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Because you have the power at your disposal if you're like me. And I don't often call myself rich. But the truth is, I have a whole lot more than a lot of people on the earth. And when I'm having a bad day, or I'm feeling down, or I'm feeling guilty, I have a ready supply of dark chocolate at my disposal. And that may not be virgins from all over my provinces, but I self-soothe. I push down those feelings of discomfort or guilt. And I think we all do. I think it's human. It's human nature. If we have the power to make ourselves feel better, why, we're going to make ourselves feel better, right? It's just who we are. But we need to recognize that there are times when those feelings of discomfort are there for a reason. Those feelings of discomfort are there because we need to stop and re-examine our choices. We need to stop and say, is there something I need to make right in the world? Is there something I need to go back, make a new decision, make a new choice, repent, turn another direction, walk a different path? We like to hate King Ahasuerus. We like to make him the bad guy. But the truth is that his situation is just our situation with a whole lot more power. A whole lot more power. It magnifies what a person is capable of and what their initial instinct is. And we will need to remember that as we look at Esther and the choices she continues to make on this journey, even from a position of power. Does she act for herself, or does she choose to act for her community? I think we know the answer to that already, but we're not going to talk about it today. I want us to remember as we walk away today that sometimes we have feelings of discomfort because we live in a broken world. And sometimes we have feelings of discomfort because we need to re-examine our lives. And it never hurts to do that. So this week, I encourage you to embrace moments of discomfort. That's what you want to hear from your pastor. This week, embrace moments of discomfort. When you come across a feeling that you don't like, take it out and hold it. Ask yourself, am I feeling uncomfortable because I live in a broken world, or am I feeling uncomfortable because I need to make a different choice? Trust me when I tell you that as we join our intentions and our energy with God's intentions and energy, God responds. If we will pray in that moment, God, show me. Am I uncomfortable because I need to make a change? If there's something you need to do, God will show you. God is faithful in that.